Our next session is a panel titled Relearning Indigeneity, Ecologies of Art, Sustainability and Resistance. And it's a pleasure to welcome Nida Sinnokrot, Sahar Qawasmi from Sakiya, members of other Indias, and Fatima Kaddumy via pre-recorded video, in addition to Beatrice Catanzaro from Beit al-Karama Women's Center. This session will be moderated by Alia Swastika, Director, Jogja Biennale Foundation, and Sharjah Biennale 16 co-curator. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here, very honored to be amongst all very familiar faces, but also new friends here. And yeah, this is the sessions after you have lunch, so I hope that this will be somehow freshens your day after quite long, even long sessions this morning. I'm very honored to be here with this important and significant artists and activists from the Palestine also, and some friends from, you're based in Amsterdam, yeah. So, and yeah, we'll be talking continuously also from what we heard this morning, especially from the lecture by Tariq Ali, and how can we expand the conversations from there. And of course, like, we would like to acknowledge our sympathy and solidarity for the war and crisis happen these days in Palestine, and we really hope that this kind of conversations and meetings points between artists, activists, academics can help to create like another form of solidarity in the future. The panels today is framing in the title of Relearning Indigeneity, Ecologies of Art, Sustainability and Resistance. We have 3 artists and activists here that has been working and experimenting with different communities. As I mentioned before, in Palestine, also in India, in different contexts, and different idea as well of what it means being indigenous somehow, and how to frame ourselves within this battle of identity. And also this panel somehow depart from the idea or like observation on how the neo-colonialism and extractive capitalism has been erased or created the distance between the indigenous community to their land, to their sovereignty, and as well as the grounded knowledge, the knowledge that more connected to the ancestral connections. And we could see also how the culture and belief somehow like lost, endangered, or being forgotten for the next generations. So we would like to invite these 3 panelists to share their experience in initiating and collaborating with different communities to see how art and activism somehow can be part of the process of resistance and solidarity. And we will start first with friends from Sakiya, one of the progressive initiative that started in Ramallah, and Ramallah, right? No? Yeah. And they will be presented by, sorry, I have to, Nida Sinnokrot and Sahar Qawasmi. Please, you can present, you start your presentation, the floor is yours.
Hello? Well, thank you. Um, it's a pleasure to be here. Maybe pleasure is not the right word, but it's good to be in company. We thank you for your solidarity, your shared sense of urgency, and organizing this March meeting that celebrates resilient community practices rooted in preservation and care. And we thank you and our community in Palestine and abroad. My name is Nida Sinnokrot. I'm an artist, a builder, an educator. And Sahar Qawasmi, my partner, is an architect, curator, and educator.
With our shared interest in indigenous farming practices, our efforts came together and we established Sakiya Art, Science, Agriculture, a project we started working on nomadically in 2012, activating derelict sites and community center gardens with roundtable discussions, bringing together artists, farmers, academics, and students.
We'll begin with a brief introduction of the demographic changes and challenges in Palestine that led to the establishment of Sakiya.
Colonization and its policies of extraction and land annexation in Palestine have resulted in a shift in labor trends. Since the 1970s, many Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza have shifted their labor from working in agriculture to building manual labor and service industries in Israeli factories, projects, and settlements. There are 150,000 documented workers from the West Bank and Gaza in Israeli projects conditioned to precarity. Another major wave of rural migration began in 2002 with the erection of Israel's apartheid wall separating villages from their arable lands. This marked an increase in exodus to West Bank cities infused with foreign aid, cultural funding, and Palestinian Authority jobs. This also marks a shift in narratives of resistance from one where struggle to work and protect ancestral lands is replaced by struggle to secure mortgages, leaving most farming villages shadows of what they once were.
Yeah, the occupation, the continued annexation of our land and water resources, the apartheid system of enforced geographic fragmentation and segregation, post-Oslo rise of neoliberal policies, the NGOization of our civil society, the increasing numbers of disenfranchised youth and inability of our education system to cope with this situation are compounded conditions that led to the establishment of Sakiya Art, Science, Agriculture. How can the merging of artistic methodologies with agricultural practices address this loss of cultural capital, this memory of an indigenous mythology once rooted in an imbalanced, embodied stewardship of nature? Pre-colonized mythologies, we argue, can be surfaced with artistic methodologies that embrace alternative agricultural traditions and repair the loss of that cultural capital. Sahar and I operated from the premise that cultural funding was exacerbating a culture of dependency. We sought to bring the sites of cultural production and food production back together. But if the ancestral farm is annexed and the museum inaccessible, what could we do?
In 2016, in collaboration with Khalil Sakakini Cultural Center in Ramallah, Sakiya held its first symposium, Under the Tree, Taxonomy, Empire, and Reclaiming the Commons, co-produced with Dr. Shela Sheikh, brought together farmers, academics, scientists, artists, and students, featuring Vivian Sansour, Omar Tasdel, and Munir Fakhreddin. We built a compost center made from repurposed cement mixers and an urban vegetable garden to host permaculture classes with Saad Dagher, and a traveling book scanner to harvest knowledge by Marcel Mars, and a moving garden by Annika Barkan.
During that nomadic period, polyculture emerged as a theme. Polyculture extends beyond agricultural practices, evolving into a metaphorical celebration of diversity across life, spirit, and mind, an embrace of multiple voices. In 2017, Art, Science, Agriculture Sakiya, was formally established as a progressive academy, residency program, research hub, and farm located in Ain Kenya, a small agricultural village just 7 kilometers west of Ramallah.
The rewilded hillside on which Sakiya is located is home to 2 holy trees, the oak balut tree and the qayqab arbutas adrakne tree. The shrine of Abu al-Ainain, right next to this qayqab tree, and the al-Ainain spring. Once fully cultivated with vegetables, grains, fruits, and olive orchards, these lands, owned by the Zalatimo family, had fallen into disrepair since the occupation of the West Bank in 1967.
Sakiya's vision is liberation through a society whose confidence is rooted in traditional and contemporary ecological practices, whose tolerance echoes nature's diversity, whose generosity springs from collective labor, whose creativity is enriched by the intersections between art, science, and agriculture, and whose prosperity is shared beyond boundaries.
In Arabic, every word comes from a 3-letter root. Meaning is relational and entangled in structure, encoded in this root. The root of Sakiya is Sakiya. It relates to the stem of a mushroom, papyrus, an irrigation ditch, a water wheel, a cup bearer, to quench someone's thirst, the act of supplying or obtaining water. It also means to conclude a sharecropping contract or the right to access water, to tend or to care, and to make flow.
By grafting local agrarian traditions of self-sufficiency with contemporary art and ecological practices, we cultivate new narratives around our relationship to the land and commons, or masha in Arabic. Sakiya's model integrates agriculture within a framework of interdisciplinary residency program where marginalized cultural actors such as farmers, small crafts industry initiatives assume a prominent role alongside artists and scholars, challenging the demographic and geographic divides that characterize cultural consumption. Our research explores ways in which collective action in art practice can decolonize the visible and hidden infrastructures of occupation that govern our relationship to nature more generally. By connecting knowledge intimately to land, Sakiya addresses the challenges we face locally while developing methodologies at the intersection of art, science, and agriculture as part of a worldwide commons that can be shared through teaching, publishing, and exhibitions. This polycultural approach, which we call rewilding pedagogy, employs symposia, a summer school, garden classrooms, community kitchens, celebrations, thematically driven open calls, as well as discrete artistic interventions. To rewild our imaginations, we have to rewild our narrative structures, as well as our environment.
In Our Garden is our classroom initiative. Our site becomes a canvas for different ecologies, each with a set of aesthetic, architectural, social, political, historical, and environmental qualities. These gardens as classrooms function as common spaces for various artistic, academic, and philosophical discourses and are inspired by the historical forests, olive, citrus, and other trees. The different gardens host learning, reading, discussion groups, art interventions, communal activities of making, sharing, planting, cooking, and eating together.
Community members of Ain Kenya, our host village, are actively involved in the stewardship and design of our site. Our outdoor classrooms utilize traditional concepts such as mujawara, which means to be one's neighbor or to be taken into protection. This old Islamic tradition, in this old Islamic tradition, an apprentice becomes a very close neighbor of a master, observing, asking questions, taking notes, assisting, discussing, and sharing. This mujawara takes first and foremost nature as the master, and also everyone else in the classroom. The classrooms take on different formats inspired by the halaka, a link in a circle of mu'allimin, or knowledgeable ones, who share, ask, listen, and imagine together. Here you can see our internship and apprenticeship programs in action, utilizing traditional tools and methods in the restoration and renovation of our lands and historic sites. We spend a lot of time at Sakiya erecting and repairing dry stack stone walls. Here they're called sanasil. The root of the word is the same for necklace. We are adorning the land with jewels of stone. But this is a dying art form the world over. We are fortunate to work with Yusuf Yaqub. Yusuf is muallim, or a master in the building arts. Often we have passerbys stop to watch the careful work of choosing and stacking particular stones and perhaps share a story of so-and-so's father who built a particular wall and how it's still standing, or so-and-so's wall collapsed in the last rain despite it being only a few years old. Invariably, though, the question of concrete comes up. Why don't you use cement? It'll last longer. You won't have to think about it, and you'll be finished in no time. You'll save so much money. This is an example of the colonization of an indigenous architectural and spatial memory that we're attempting to decolonize through our collaborative work and by sharing this work and the stories it generates. Sakiya's ongoing ephemeral infrastructure open call draws on Dr. Tawfiq Kan'an's turn of the 20th century classification of Palestinian demonology as earth spirits, subterranean spirits, and hellish spirits. Here, we reimagine these categories as above ground, ground, and below ground, and consider how infrastructure, those invisible, technical, and functional networks that govern and manage everyday life, might address, as did the spirit order, the anxieties that narrate our relationship to nature and to humanity. Ephemeral infrastructures provide platforms that both attend to physiological needs while creating collective spaces that explore ecological narratives for a renewed relationship to land and to one another. This is a slide from one of my students' work, Nadia Asfour, who created these tarot cards to maybe inspire new narrative structures. The technologies and mythologies used to maintain colonial narratives of progress, extraction, liberation are not neutral. And so, if we are to build for equal rights and justice, we need not only sustainable technologies and practices around food production, but first and foremost, sustainable mythologies that embrace collective practice and dismantle the visible and hidden infrastructures of occupation that govern our lives.
Designing collective practices and commoning is one of our primary goals. This is a long, ongoing, and multifaceted project that takes years. And we began by engaging with the community of Ain Kenya. In both Sakiya's master plan as well as visioning sessions on the future of the village. In this project you see here are the results of urban master planning project that we carried out with Dr. Natasha Aruri, May Battat, Wala al-Mallah, and 20 women from Ain Kenya. Each woman created a vision of the future of the village. The illustrations were made by Yara Bamie and Basel Nasser.
As an example of Sakiya's interventions, we addressed the fact that building fences in occupied Palestine is often prohibited and scarecrows are often targeted and removed by Israeli soldiers. Scarecrow in Arabic is faza'a. The root of this word references both fear and astonishment. We are more focused on astonishing. Sakiya has thus conceived sonic faza'a, a totem to animal migration, to coming, going, waiting, and to hosting. These devices are both aesthetic and functional, aiding local farmers by sonically deterring wild boar as crops mature while ceasing their sound after harvest, thus welcoming the boar to till the soil. Fluid and permeable, their sonic presence and absence challenge the absolute binary of inside and outside that defines enclosure. Inspired by the spirit world that inhabits Sakiya's site, these sonic scarecrows are revenant, reverberant bodies that witness rather than surveil, and resonate with mythical creatures to resituate the non-human within an acoustic ecology.
In this iteration, the scarecrows manifest as germinating water vessels that amplify compositions recorded by Bint Mbarih in close collaboration with the land that Sakiya stewards while she was in residence. Bint Mbarih's composition, titled Lentil Soup as an Antidote to Rampant Wildfires, animates rain and other elements into a speculative future that is simultaneously dystopian and flooded with possibility. Maybe you can help us play this sound clip. Thank you.
Maybe we can get some help to play the sound. So what you see here, these scarecrows would be.
دخلتني البيت أعطتني جرابات دافية ولا تضلك حافية ولا تضلك حافية دخلتني البيت أعطتني جرابات دافية ولا تضلك حافية
So these would be placed in a field, so they wouldn't be fence-like. They're transducers attached to these clay vessels, 24 clay vessels, made by Noor Menawi, who's a potter from Jaffa, carrying on his family's tradition. The vessels on the ground respond and call to the conjoined vessel that symbolizes the mother's voice in Bint Mbarih's composition. This work was also part of, here shown in the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, in a show called The Eddy of the Stream, organized by Cooking Sections. It was a duo show. The work was also part of the Great Repair exhibition that opened in September 23 in Berlin. So this would be an example of an artwork that Sakiya co-authors, and it's meant to circulate within the art world with the idea that the sales would then support the work at Sakiya on site.
Our list of collaborators and muallimeen, as we call our residents, is very long to celebrate here today. A lot of our collaborators, friends, and artists in residence are here today, and we're so happy to see them. And we're going also to see Jumana Emil Aboud and Shayma Hamad later, who also worked with Sakiya. We'll see their work in a little bit. Our farms are tended to by Yara Dwani and Anas Al-Ous from the Musliman farms in Bil'ain. Our farms are sites for learning and creating food. We cook almost everything on site from the food we cultivate or forage. Samia Halabi, our first artist in residence, created a series of works made with natural pigments she produced on site. And we've produced her natural crayons, colors of Palestine, for sale. You'll see it here. We hosted Jumana Emil Aboud, whose Water Diviners project deeply influenced our understanding of our spirit world. Jumana worked with women from Ain Kenya, university students and young artists to remap water springs and their folk tales in and around Ain Kenya. Shayma Hamad researched and recreated traditional recipes from fruits of wild trees on our site. This is a bread she produced from our historic oak tree. Our oak tree is more than 2,500 years old.
The oldest tree in the region, widely understood as such. Here, Tariq Khalef designed a smokeless fire pit, you see in the foreground, inspired by the science and geometry of Islamic astrology, made in collaboration with Nader Khouri of Zenatech in Birzeit. Tariq's work has since evolved into a college class in association with the Arab American University that teaches on-site geometry and mathematics through the observation of patterns of nature. As part of another collaboration, we're designing our outdoor kitchen. Here you see it in the state we found it, whose construction brings together the heritage technology of Zir pot evaporative cooling systems. The pots are modular and self-watering, drawing from Dr. Omar Yagi's groundbreaking material science work, as well as from accounts of Maimonides, the Jewish scholar who wrote 1,000 years ago, that mentioned presumably stone water condensers in Palestine. Here we have students from my class at MIT, as well as Birzeit University, iterate the design prompts with Bilal Saleimeh from the Hebron Pottery School. We've developed a number of other traditional technologies to support the kitchen, which will hopefully allow us to generate income. Of course, no restaurant is complete without a toilet, and maybe we should mention that Sakiya is a completely rewilded site, so there's no, conventional plumbing or electricity or roads. And so one of my design prompts in my art and agriculture class was to design a metabolic toilet that looks at human waste and the nitrogen cycle from the lens of soil health and metabolic time. The prompt was to design a toilet that combines a Geneva mechanism, that intervalometer that you find in every clock, camera, and machine gun, with a 19th century Reverend Moule earth closet. The design our students came up with is a sculptural, cinematic, panoramic earth closet that rotates 1 degree every time it's used, offering a variable connection to the landscape. Here you can see a model produced by Aranzazu Dareno Bello, one of our students. The clock-like rotation of the toilet solves what we call the peaking problem at the scale of a community, efficiently promoting composting and pathogen elimination.
The plans for these projects and many others, artworks, research, etc., are published in our publications as textbooks for summer school students. In keeping with our seasonal approach, in the spring and fall, we host residents. In the winter, we compile and publish our research, and in the summer, we have students and children that take part in the activities of the site.
This seasonal cycle connects to our land's natural rhythms. Sakiya is an experience in slow time, in metabolic time, in time to heal, time to grow, time to build shelter and care for one another.
The loss of land associated with the Israeli occupation is not only measured by lost area, but also in lost tradition and knowledge, a loss of our traditional commoning practices and masha'. The erosion of this practice first dates back to Ottoman times with the passing of the 1858 land law, marking shift towards mapping system. Land became private property. Subsequently, during the British Mandate period, further regulations were passed with the aim to eradicate the masha', which was understood as primitive. And these agricultural practices associated with the masha'.
Nevertheless, the custom of masha' or commoning persisted. Under Israeli occupation, the vast majority of the remaining masha' fell under Israeli military law, classified as Area C. Today, what is left of common lands in Area A is threatened by large-scale Palestinian development projects with parcel, assigned title, and sell-off lands, often under protest because there's nowhere to expand. Sakiya is a project that seeks to keep the culture of Masha alive under this political, economic, and social reality. Mapping as a tool for subjugation and control is all too palpable. Military drones from nearby Israeli settlements fly over Sakiya on a weekly basis. Seeking to take control of aerial mapping technologies, we made our own site survey as a countermap and digital repository for the oral histories we are accumulating on site, as well as a way to preserve our collective memory and offer a digital commons countermap through which artists and researchers and storytellers can engage remotely. But as we mentioned, these technologies are not neutral, and this raises a lot of pressing questions about rooted indigenous land-based practice. Circling back to one of our initial questions, what happens if the ancestral farm is annexed and the museum inaccessible?
But in the scale of deep time, let's take refuge in the wisdom of the boulder of sunrise, قلعة صباح الخير on our site. شروق حرب beautifully captures this symbol of new beginnings after death in her film, Untitled Sketch. Let's take a moment to watch this short 2-minute excerpt from her work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring and touching. And yeah, I really learned how this process of common learning and unlearning somehow also build the new imagination of something that we has lost or people forgot, or also coming like the result of very long process of occupation. So I hope to hear more from you during the Q&A sessions, and we can continue to Bait al-Karama, still from the same context of what happened in Palestine. And I think somehow it's very connected also on the side of how the women's voice or this what's so-called sometimes as taken for granted as domestic knowledge also become like one of the sources or the main narrative of our grounded indigenous knowledge. So we have here, sorry, I have to, Beatrice Catanzaro and Fatima Kaddumy. They are from Bait Al-Karama. It's like the women's center that focusing on preservations or working with foods and cooking, and Beatrice will be explaining more later on. In Palestine, it's unfortunate that Fatima cannot join us today, but we will start the presentation by watching her video. So she recorded a bit of introduction to about Bait Al-Karama from the video. So it will be in Arabic, so you can listen through the translations machine. Now we can start with the video.
أنا فاطمة القدومي، مدير ومؤسس مركز بيت الكرامة التابع لجمعية البلدة القديمة الخيرية. طبعاً عنوان المركز هو مدينة نابلس بدولة فلسطين. العنوان الأقرب في قلب المدينة اللي هو البلدة القديمة، طبعاً في قلب مدينة نابلس. البيت هو عبارة عن مبنى عثماني من أيام الحكم العثماني، فبالتالي عمره مئات السنوات، وهبته العائلة إلنا لحتى يكون أول مركز نسوي موجود في البلدة القديمة. طبعاً المركز تقوده أو تديره بالكامل نساء. أول ما بلشنا بالمركز لحتى يكون عندنا مركز نسوي اللي هو نقدر ندير من خلاله الأنشطة، اللقاءات، المجموعات، أي شيء يخص المرأة والطفل وكمان المجتمع الفلسطيني اللي إحنا موجودين حواليه. بعد ما تأسس المركز لقينا حالنا إنه بس إحنا قاعدين في غرف فاضية، لا في طاولات لا في كراسي ولا في أي شيء تاني، فكأنه الحلم بلش خلص هون وما عرفنا شو في بعد. بهديك الفترة التقيت بصبية إيطالية اسمها بياتريتشا كاتنزارو، كانت جاية عنا هون على فلسطين. فحكينا كتير في هاي الأمور والتقينا في كتير نقاط. فمن ضمن الحكي بتقولي ليش ما نبلش نعمل دروس بالطبيخ الفلسطيني. طبعاً للوهلة الأولى كانت أغبى فكرة أنا بسمعها بحياتي، إنك كفلسطينية تنتقلي من الأنشطة السياسية والأنشطة المجتمعية لأنك أنت بس تكوني موجودة في المطبخ. كانت بالنسبة لي فكرة كتير غبية صراحة، واعذريني بياتريتشا. فالمهم بعد دقائق فكرت في الموضوع، قلت ليش لا؟ إذا إحنا بنقدر إن نحط القضية الفلسطينية على الطاولة، وإذا إحنا بنقدر إن نكون عامل جذب للأجانب وللسياح وللضيوف من كل دول العالم لحتى ييجوا لعنا هون يشوفوا القصص، يسمعونا، يشوفونا، يتعرفوا علينا، فهذا ممكن يكون جانب من مساهمتنا كنساء موجودين بمدينة نابلس. وبالفعل بلشنا بدروس تعليم الطبيخ الفلسطيني للأجانب. بتذكر أول معيق كان إلنا إنه هو إحنا كيف ممكن نعلم؟ إحنا ما عندنا قدرة إن نعلم، يعني إحنا الطبيخ بالنسبة لنا إشي يعني فطري طبيعي، وإنك تاخدي على عاتقك مهمة التعليم كانت هذه كتير صعبة. بس مع مرور الأيام تعلمنا كيف نعلم، وتعلمنا إحنا كمان شغلات كتيرة من خلال طبعاً وضع القضية الفلسطينية على المائدة. هلأ كيف إحنا قدرنا نحقق هذه الشغلة؟ من ضمن الأمور اللي إحنا بنوفرها في مركز تعليم الطبيخ الفلسطيني اللي هي جولات تذوق في الأسواق الفلسطينية. بينزل فيها السائح معانا على البلد، بتعرف على أهل البلد، بيحكوا له مباشرة عن قصصهم، بنحكي عن التاريخ، بنحكي عن العادات، التقاليد، شو في قصص كمان ما وراء الأكل. وبالمناسبة كان هذا اكتشاف كتير حلو لإلنا، لأنه إحنا ما كنا نربط الطعام بالقصص اللي فيما بعد، ليش اخترعوه، كيف اخترعوه، شو ألوانه، شو مناسبته في أي موسم، حتى تسميته كمان. صار في عنا اهتمامات تانية، خاصة إنه إحنا كشعب فلسطيني يمكن من مئات السنوات وإحنا مشغولين بالاحتلال، لدرجة إنه انشغالنا بالاحتلالات المتكررة لهتنا عن حالنا، لهتنا إنه إحنا نتعرف عن هويتنا صح. فكمان كنساء كانت هاي بالنسبة لنا كتير مهمة. الخدمات اللي بنقدمها طبعاً مدرسة تعليم الطبيخ الفلسطيني أتاحت لنا إنه نفتح أقسام جديدة من خلال الدخل اللي بيدخل علينا. صار في عنا اللي هو صالون تجميل، صالون التجميل الهدف منه كان إنه تعليم النساء كيف ممكن الوحدة فيهم تبلش مشروعها الخاص، كيف ممكن إنها تنجح. الهدف منها كمان الأكثر بالنسبة لنا إحنا هون في إدارة المركز، إنك أنت تعملي من الست مش فئة مستهدفة، تعملي منها شريك ممكن تساهم في إدارة بيتها، ممكن تساهم في إعالة زوجها وأولادها. ففي عنا اللي هو صالون التجميل، في عنا كمان قاعة للتدريب. هاي القاعة للتدريب بنعطي فيها ورش عمل فيما يختاروه النساء أنفسهم. نحن مش مقيدين، ممكن اليوم بدهم تفريغ نفسي، ممكن اليوم بدهم أيام مفتوحة، فيما يخص بحقوق المرأة، أي موضوع النساء بتختاره طبعاً إحنا بنحضره. كمان بلشنا مع الأطفال في فعاليات كتيرة. طبعاً إحنا بنحكي عن 2008 بداية تأسيس المركز، 2010 كنا المطبخ الفلسطيني، 2011 كنا في سلو فود إيطالي. طبعاً هاي كمان أعطتنا مجال كتيرة إنه ننشر حالنا كنساء فلسطينيات على صعيد العالم كله، ومظلة سلو فود كمان ساعدتنا للأمانة، صار التواصل مع السواح أكثر. نرجع للأطفال. لما بتدخلي في الأطفال بتدخلي في عالم تاني، عالم كتير جديد، في احتياجات ومتغيرات. بالنسبة لنا الأطفال هن الأمل، هن المستقبل. في عنا إحنا نوادي صيفية سنوية لما لا يقل عن 130-150 طفل من أهالي البلدة القديمة. في عنا توزيع قرطاسية للمدارس، في عنا توزيع حلويات كمان للأطفال. في عنا أيام مفتوحة، أيام طبية، تفريغ نفسي. كل الأنشطة المتعلقة بالأطفال كمان إحنا بناخدها على عاتقنا. مع مرور السنوات ولد عنا جيل من المتطوعين اللي تربوا عنا في النوادي الصيفية، واللي بالتالي صاروا هن قادرين على إدارة هذه الأنشطة فيما يرتؤونه مناسباً، لأنه هن في الأصل سنة بعد سنة سنة بعد سنة كانوا موجودين عنا وتربوا هون وكبروا هون. نحن كفلسطينيين مقولة دائماً بنحكيها إنه نموت وتحيا فلسطين، بس إحنا بالنسبة لنا لا، بدنا نعيش عشان تعيش فلسطين. ومهم كتير إنه هذه الأجيال كلها نخليها تشوف البلد، نخليها تشوف الوطن، نخليها تشوف الحياة باتجاه تاني. نحكي على رمضان. طبعاً رمضان كتير مهم بالنسبة لنا كمسلمين. في رمضان بتسكر أبواب المركز كاملة، كل هاي الأنشطة بتتسكر، سواء كمدرسة لتعليم الطبيخ الفلسطيني، كورش عمل للنساء، لأنه بيكون عندنا في رمضان برنامج خاص اللي هو الطبيخ للعائلات المحتاجة. كل يوم إحنا بنطبخ لما لا يقل عن 100 عائلة. في عندك توزيع معونات إما مالية أو مادية أو عينية. في عندك بنص رمضان طبعاً إحنا بنبلش نوزع لبسة العيد للعائلات المحتاجة وذوي الدخل المحدود. وفي عندك طبعاً على مشارف العيد بنبلش نوزع الحلويات. فبالتالي والحمد لله إحنا طول الوقت في كل المواسم في كل المناسبات موجودين مع أهلنا في البلدة القديمة.
Yeah. Thank you, Fatima. So now Beatrice has been involved with Karama, started as artist in residence, but then continue the collaborations for a few years there. So maybe you can share also how do you experience working with them, and yeah, like maybe sharing some stories that not mentioned by Fatima. Please, yeah.
Thank you. Is on? Yes. Marhaba. Thank you very much for hosting us. Greetings from Fatima. I knew this would happen. Yeah, I first met Fatima in 2009. I was in a residency program in Bet Sahur by Decolonizing Architecture. And I started wandering through the country, and I really met Fatima in an iftar of Ramadan organized by the labor union. I don't know how I ended up there, honestly. But the Palestinians are so incredibly hospitable that somehow you find yourself in situations. She was sitting next to me, and there was something clicking there, a friendship. Sorry. I was very brave until 10 minutes ago. The reason she can't be here is, of course, because she can't leave her family behind. So basically, I moved in her house with kids and husbands and family members, large families. I learned to make coffee. I became, I became a furniture of the house, literally. What was driving me as an artist, as a person, was to find, I don't know, there was something there that I just felt I need to do something with this woman. I need to do something here in Nablus. And I remember one morning I woke up and I told Fatima, I have an amazing idea. Let's do a cooking school. She was like, Yani, yes, of course. As she said in the video, we have other struggles to deal with. But friendships sometimes, overcome those naiveties, right? And the year after I came back with a bag full of money, I'm joking, but I did a lot of informal fundraising. And the reason for that was that we didn't know what to do, but we knew that we needed some money to start. But money are tricky, and we all know that. So applying for money implies strings, and sometimes those strings are confusing because they determine your future, and you want to determine your future. So we organized a lot of fundraising events with the great support of friends and institutions. And then we went to buy furnitures and to try to get some nice tables, some nice chairs, no plastic, wood stuff. And I maybe scroll for another image. And so we had, and as Fatima said, we have in concession this beautiful place in the heart of the old city. And Fatima has a magic because she managed to keep all kind of people together. So as we started our cooking school, not knowing how to teach, but learning by doing, at the same time we had reading session of the Quran and hairdressing workshops going on in the beauty salon. And that kind of holding together without exclusion was really a life school for me. I was extremely curious to know about food and to investigate research. So we very casually decided that we would go in villages and interview women, sitting and having coffee and talking about food. So we started to learn from other women. And this trigger of, we have been talking about history this morning, and we connected with stories. I think that in retrospective, we really tried to retrace history through stories, bringing together those fragments. And I saw women, I say our women, we were a bunch of women. I was driving the car and, we got lost, more than the drivers here, many, many times. We went to Til to learn how to make maftoul. We went to other villages to learn how to do bread. And then we brought those women to the Women's Center, gathering around 50 Palestinian women cooking at the same time. You have no idea what that is. And sharing stories. And then those stories were repeated to the guests, to the visitors. And, and you could see, the kind of like, I know the story now. And knowing your story brings about a dignity. Beit al-Karama means house of dignity. And one day I remember Fatima telling me on where we had a couch where we used to sit in the night talking. We call it our space shuttle. And she told me, Bea, I learned myself through the other. you and all the foreigners coming here, you're enabling me to see who I am and to retrace that history. I promise I would be short. I'll be short. So food is not only what you get in your plate, right? Food is a gesture. Food is that warmth gesture. And it's not just in the domestic space, it's in the landscape, it's in the souk. Once that gesture is not performed, something is not there anymore. That story is not there anymore. If the knafe guy is not flipping the knafe as he normally does, then that visual memory is not there. So the gesture is essential. I spent hours staring at the hands of women cooking, and I found them so beautiful. There was no cooking books. They knew everything through the intelligence of their hands. Well, also me, because I roll cigarettes, so they asked me to roll the waradawali, the wine leaves, so I improved my skills. So here are some cooking classes. And well, those are our gatherings, the 50 women I told you about before. So we have kept this routine over the years. We opened 2010, and we are still up and running. We don't have a bag full of money anymore. As Fatima said in the video, now the focus is moving, of course, towards the emergency we are experience every day. So the social intervention is essential. We are very much rooted in the heart of the old city. The network is essential. We are becoming like, I would say, hub, to be fancy. We are like a crossroad of food coming in, we distributing. We have been mapping the old city to know which are the most in need families, and this allows us to bring food directly to those families, always with dignity. So it's better to come before someone is asking, right? When we started, when I first met Fatima, the first thing she told me was, Bea, we can start a women's center and a cooking school, but the day we will need it, it will turn into a shelter. For an artist, it's not easy to take because you think, no, we're gonna make like, well, you know what? I think I learned, I don't like to use the term resilience because it's a bit abused, but the soft bonding with our ideas. So we also have to accept that things change, and probably now we are closer to become a shelter. Hopefully not. But certainly our focus right now, where from 9 to 4 every day, 7 women comes in the center, apart from Fridays. And 3 are working in the kitchen, and 4 are educating kids. And on top of that, we are following a group of women to help them to overcome and survive these times, where their husband has been taken from home and their kids. So this is very much what we are busy with. And the last image is the souk. I think the most beautiful souk in the Middle East. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you so much, all the panelists today. We had learned 3 different cases. Like the first 2 really much contextualize of what happened today on how the conflict, wars, occupation is really much also is a threat for the whole culture, history, and local knowledge, and then connecting to what happened in India with the experience from friends from the other India, to somehow from the generation to learn also. I think it's important also to underline this transgenerational knowledge disseminations and preservations. Yeah, I think for me, like maybe I'll just give like 1 or 2 questions, and then we can have like more Q&A sessions with the audience here. Like from me, it's like maybe a bit, how I call it, naive and very, I don't know, like we can say pragmatic questions. Is like, I'm thinking like with the context of Palestine today, and you've been working a lot to somehow reconnecting with the history and how the soil, the foods, the plants, the archaeological landscape there really much also like the source of the knowledge. That's somehow the artifact of the knowledge and the history that lies already for 1,000 years. So how do you think of like the future if we want to connect the history and the future of what has been doing by Sakiya? So that's also connected to the Ba'id al-Karama. How do you see the future and the continuity of all these activities done by all the wonderful women? I think it's not only about the food, the knowledge, the sharing, but it's really give, as you mentioned before, it's become the shelter where the women found like this personal and intimate bonding become very important of what happened today.
Thanks, Alia. Honestly, I don't know if we're always able to think about the future. I mean, what's really constant in our lives is survival, where every detail in our lives is not given. It's a struggle. And so every single detail is about surviving at the same time. And this is the beauty of it. And we're looking for liberation. I mean, we see it. We know it's coming. We see it. And we practice it. Even as we're trying to survive and thinking about every detail, we live in a state of liberation. Like there's something that we can feel that we know is there. And it can never be done without our community. And that's something really, really beautiful in Palestine. It's small, we're close-knitted, we care for our communities most of the time. There's something still really, despite a lot of consumerist, of course, trends and a lot of ways that things have changed over the years that make cultures of debt and consumerism really about self-maintaining. There's still a lot of community building and community aspects in Palestine. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think I already kind of threw a wish before. Obviously, before coming here and sharing with you, I had a long conversation with Fatima, and this was one of the elephant in the room. Yani, she always tells me, well, you know, I'm a mother, what should I do? I need to give a future. And Palestine is always pictured as a mother. But certainly, I think the intense daily work, at least for what concerns Beit al-Karama, is, it's a, you know, as she says, I keep myself busy.
I think we can have 2 or 3 questions here.
Hello. This is for Sakiya. So I live in Ramallah, and I've been going to Sakiya since I was younger. And I have a very special place in my heart for it, long before it was Sakiya. I remember very well how it looked before you did the work that you've done on it, and it is a really powerful thing to see what has happened. I mean, I met my partner under the tree. I was wondering if you could expand on what you said when you mentioned the mythologies around the land. I'd love to hear more about that.
I think we collect first the questions, yeah, please.
I think we stopped hearing after you said you met your partner under the tree.
Oh.
We stopped listening.
Oh, I was interested about what you said about the connection between mythologies and the land, and I was wondering if you could expand more about that. I'd really love to learn what you meant.
First, thanks for sharing. That's how I met Sahar. It's a very romantic place.
We're gonna release an app. Watch for it. Do you want to say something? No? Okay, I'll speak. It's incredible, right? You feel it. I mean, I don't know of anybody who've been on that land who doesn't say, I feel something, there's something that talks to me. Like, I understand these trees and these rocks and the spring. This belief that people before us, their spirits are still around, and they take care of the land for us. There's also the belief that certain animals take care of certain natural elements. Like our spring at Sakiya is protected by a gazelle, and people tell stories about seeing the gazelle. So they would come at night, and there would be a gazelle, and it's the it only appears at night. Nobody knows where it goes and how it appears. There are so many incredible stories about the spirit world in Palestine. Some of them are documented, but most of them are not documented. Jumana Emil Aboud does an incredible job of collecting a lot of stories around the spring. We believe that the stories are not just what have been practiced, believed, and retold over the centuries, but also what happens today. Like your story that you met your partner under the tree. We believe this is actually the living mythology of these elements, of these natural creatures. Zalatimo, Dawood Zalatimo, renowned Palestinian artist, established a library in the Balut, in the cavity. He put books for the children of the village when there was no school in the village. Saad Dagher filled the cavity with stones to protect it from vandalism. All of these stories are part of this growing and sustainable mythology that keeps our relationship to this tree going. And the tree connects us, right? This is what it's about. Also with Shaima, because Shaima is an artist, performer, Shaima Hamad, and also she's a lawyer. We were working on a document that shows how these mythologies are laws. How do you say laws? Laws? Yeah, so like how we protect our land is by these laws. I mean, we're not, this is how we understood where our limits are and how to treat these objects or creatures.
If you look at the hill from the village, you can see a band of green in the middle of the hill. The rest of it's been deforested at the top. And this band of green is where you find the oldest tree in the West Bank and the holy Jacob tree. And it's the spirit, it's the jinn, it's the kind of imagination of the children that keeps those trees from being cut. It's much more powerful. It's much more powerful than the laws of a nature preserve, which are greenwashing. They're there to preserve the power of the state and alienate you from those stories that are rooted in the land and rooted in care. All right, so that's what we mean as well when we say you can't have sustainable technologies without sustainable mythologies. Greenwashing, language around preservation and climate change can be equally adopted by the extreme right or to the left. So those systems of care which are rooted in community, not in laws that are enforced by authority, are those mythologies. The question is, when the land is gone that gave birth to those mythologies, can they come back? And that's what we're saying, that through artistic acts of communal care, we can even create, those mythologies are in us. We always hear people talk about epigenetic imprint of trauma in our body, but the opposite is true as well. If you slow down, engage in that deep time that Shuru Harb so beautifully showed us with the sun rising.
But he's been waiting.
Hi, thank you. So I want to thank this beautiful panel. It's so touching, so inspiring, and I met Sahar randomly, and also using this space to thank you and Nida for really touching our hearts. We were working on we were trying to think how to do solidarity with Palestine, and we came up to this phrase in Mexico saying Palestine is very near, to contrast the idea of the distance or that it's so far away and so on. And what we mean is that the settler apartheid colonial state is also reproduced almost in all nation states, including Mexico. I want to name Samir Flores Soberanes, a friend, a comrade, killed by the state 4 years ago because of struggling as a communitarian leader for the defense of the land and its territory. And this is where I think everyone can connect with Palestinian struggle for liberation. And I wanted to ask you, anyone in the panel that want to join this doubt I have about collectives in the post-digital era, no? Do we need to be grounded to a land? Do we need to be grounded to a territory, to a space? And if we're in the diasporic situation, if we're displaced or if we're not in our land, what tactics, what strategies, coming from a maybe non-instrumentalized reason place, from a space of myth, how can we connect? No? Thank you.
look, I mean, this is a great question. I think this is the question that we need to ask ourselves. We need to take advantage of these forums to ask these questions. Absolutely. I mean, there's a number of indigenous artists that are struggling with this. It's like, how can we come up with alternative spaces? Digital commons. This is, when we were threatened with having to leave Sakiya, we made that site scan to have a way to engage and a way to invite people to engage, a digital repository. But we're all very familiar with, this idea that you can't really build liberation using the master's tools. And we're all very familiar with the implications of the technologies that used to control, to subdivide, to parcel, to alienate ourselves from our resources. So there's a double-edged sword. We have to be aware of that, and we have to be prepared. And perhaps the digital world is kind of binary and linear, but it's also recursive. And so there is, I think, space to understand how pixels might become grains of sand or might become soil, But I think that's, I don't know, let's think on that together. I hope so.
I wanted just to quickly say before you speak that you asked if we should have a land to be on, and yes. At the same time, I think Beatrice saw herself in Nablus, right? And I saw myself in you, and so I know I would feel at home where you work as well. It is, of course, important, and that's why and what we're doing. But also, it's important to see ourselves with other people's struggles and ways of working and solidarities. We learn so much from each other. And yes, let's talk.
This song is land. This song is land. I think we forget this too. So, the Mashah, right, I think it's measured by the ear. I think there's other ways to cultivate spaces. If land is surveyed and controlled by cadastral mapping systems, Western perspective, this kind of idea of landscape, the difference between seeing and looking, this forms of control through the eye, the evil eye, ideas around this kind of emerge from this concept. But I think the Mashah is not so linear, right? It's a measure through the ear. How far does your mother's voice carry across a valley, across a plain? It's different, but that's a measure. That mother's voice is a measure of where you belong. So that's also something, I think that song is such a beautiful way to create a space for us.
I think also maybe just to respond to the question, I feel also it's not only about us in the arts community or the idea of collective in the arts, but what happened, for example, in Indonesia, in the indigenous community, in the remote island villages, the people themselves, they kind of practicing already this kind of resistance at using art, culture, songs, ritual as real act of political resistance and resilience. So for example, there is this movement from hundreds of women in Flores, in east part of Indonesia, where they use the textile, they have very strong culture of weaving, and one of the leader of the community started this movement, bringing all the women together. They did the weaving in the forest, because most of the forest, there will be like project of big mining that will cut all the trees in the forest. And this women leader started to have this action for 25 days of all the women living together. So, and in the end, it's like the forest now still there, so we can see how strong is the metaphor from rituals and arts is really also bringing the embodiment of the resistance in our practice of the everyday life. Instead, like, you know, while sometimes I feel like the artist or the art world trying to find like a way of finding the metaphor, but actually it's in our everyday life, all these communities already practicing all this performance. That's what I feel. Sometimes I feel I go to galleries to see, or spaces to see performance, but you know, like most of the real act of very strong resistance of performance is already happened in our everyday life. Just this response. Maybe we have another 10 minutes for one more questions, and then we can wrap the sessions. Okay, yeah. Sorry, it's all the right side.
Thank you very much for very powerful and moving presentations. So I have two quick points. The first one is a question directed to Sakiya and Bait al-Karama, which is, do you operate as cooperatives? Can you just say more about the structure of your operations? Now, the second one is an attempt to learn from your experience. So I will draw on the experience that is kind of, your presentations are familiar to me, but I'll just draw on context that I'm rooted in. So I am from Ghana, but I have worked in South Africa. Now, the category indigenous in certain African contexts actually came as a package of colonial statecrafts linked to native, okay? And often this is a way to govern societies with permeable, changing forms of identity into rooted forms of identity in order to ensure constant supply of people, say to mines or commercial colonial farms. And in the post-colonial period, people mobilized that category to actually make very modern demands, you know, but the indigenous kind of as a way of grounding that. But I fully understand what it means in, say, Palestine, for example, given the settler colonial history. So I just want you, and again, this is linked to your point about decolonization, you know, because I do know that sections of the Hindu rights, at least the intellectual wing of it, uses decolonization, you see, as some kind of an umbrella term. So how does one grapple with these appropriations, but also the question of concrete building of collectives? Because I think the idea of collective is this opening, right? And doing boundaries and so on. So I don't know if the question is clear, but thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I very much identify with what you're saying, and this question of being indigenous certainly needs to be understood, maybe through a more shifting and permeable relation. And one example is like the colonizer creating these enclosures around these definitions is the term permaculture, which we now try to avoid. And it's a term coined by Bill Mollison to repackage an indigenous, land-based mode of relationship with place, but it's a shifting one. You move. And that idea of being able to move and being able to migrate and reinvent and leave is an essential one. And being able to return. We have to be able to return, we have to be able to leave, we have to be able to come back and carry with us different knowledges and be able to share. And I think those people that do share and have this light foot relationship are carrying with them these heritage knowledges and traditional practices that can be understood as being indigenous, but I think it's more like indigeneity and ingenious, and there's other ways to maybe think through that. Now, how does that relate to how we organize and cooperatives? Is another great question. I'll let Sahar answer, as Sahar is more in charge of the day-to-day. Well, it's typical, but there's also the hit. Yeah, but the mother's voice, these kind of matrilateral connections to commons.
You need to go back to the tree.
Yeah,
Get an answer.
The commons in Palestine that have survived the longest are those that are matrilaterally passed on. And again, this has to do with these kind of patriarchal ideas of ownership and property and wealth, and rather than giving it over to, multitude, exponentially more people that have a relationship through inheritance laws. And it's because of that lands stayed in common. It was hard. You can't sell the land because you got 1,000 inheritors now. So it forces these kind of ways of cooperating and different modes of cooperating that we're not used to practicing.
Yeah, how we're registered is not at all reflecting of how we do work. We're registered at the Palestinian Ministry of Economy as a not-for-profit company, and it was simply for practical reasons that we had to do this registration, and now we're thinking about other modes. You couldn't actually register as a cooperative that does something other than agriculture, like the art and other things. Yeah, so it was only practical.
Well, sadly, I follow the practical. We're the two women managing here, the household. We are a local charity registered by the Palestinian authorities as well, which is an umbrella organization, is a charity of the old city of Nablus. But we are pretty independent also from them, so we are holding the ground. I just wanted to add, I thank you for your intervention. I think we also discussed previously the problematic in using those terms and those words that separate, those words that fragment, that is always creating this I-other. So maybe we should work with metaphors and image work that help us instead cohabiting, or and as you were talking, I was thinking how the diamond come to the surface is a rough cluster of bits and pieces of a lot of different things, and geologists call this clustering inclusions. And I find it very beautiful because it's holding together of memories of geological times. Then, of course, humans take and shape and control and tame, and then you have the beautiful diamond. But when it surfaces, it's a cluster of inclusions. And maybe if we would learn as artists to work more with the imaginal thinking that we hold, instead of using words that chop us into pieces, that could be an interesting start. like the tree. Like the tree, for example. Yeah, the dating tree. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I just invite everyone here to give applause and appreciate so much to all the panelists this morning. Yeah. We will bring the song, the imagination of is our revolution, out to the breakout room. Thank you so much.